Daayoosh, Ethan Petticrew, to give us a talk about decolonizing education. Give him a warm welcome. Thanks so much.
I was supposed to give the tech guys in the back a 1-minute warning. I guess this is your 1-minute warning, guys, but a little delayed. Want to come up? Daayoosh yuachtu SOK, kiksadi ayachat, kakan hitta ayachat, kleit ka yadi ayachat, ana uttachchan ayachat, kachachana shchat kwan tachayachat. So in my mother's language, unangam tunu, kanglage kasakta kuk, atcham asal ilagan, asal atchach asal kachachana ak ilagan angichta kuk, ankarichach awakuk, nigo kasakuk asal unangam ukuk, unangach akuk. My name is Ethan Petticrew, and I'm from this wonderful town of Wrangell. I was born and raised here. I was educated here through high school and then left and have been back intermittently. And I just got to say, my heart just cries out to be at home. I'm ready to start crying right now to see all these faces. So forgive me if I get emotional up here, folks. It's just good to be at home. And I want to recognize that I am on the land of the Shkat Kwan. We call ourselves that. I know many people know us as Shtachin Kwan. Locally, we often refer to ourselves as Shkat Kwan. So I just want to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Shkat Kwan, once the largest Kwan in Southeast. And today, as Richard said, we have no land. We need to change that. My mother's family was actually from the Aleutian Islands. They came from Umnak and Atka, so they're Kaolangich and Nigogich in their language. They are termed sons of sea lions, I guess, Kaolangich. And it's Unangach Akuch. Unangach is the name of the Aleut people. Aleut is a Russian term and kind of a slave name. So and many of us prefer the name Unangach on my mother's side. I was adopted by and raised in this town, and I was adopted by Shawachuku Titichtla, or many of you know her as, I can already say her name without crying, Marge Bradley Bird. She was dear to me as a young child growing up. She took me in the hem of her robe, in that frog robe she wore, and she made me one of her. I was so honored the day she said, "I'm going to adopt you." I couldn't help but beam with glory. And so I walk in both of those worlds. My mother's world, Unangach, they were interned in the Aleut evacuation, brought down here, staged at the Institute for a while. Then her family ended up Wards Lake, others at Burnett Inlet, eventually ended up back here with my great aunt, Sarah Stevenson, Mert's mother, and then met my dad. So in that internment, a third of her village died in those 4 years. That's horrendous. But I have to also say that the bittersweet is, if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be here. My mother would never have gotten out, and she would never have met my father, and I wouldn't have been blessed to be Kiksadi. So with that, I just have to thank Wrangell for taking this little Aleut boy and making me one of you. And I thank you for that, because I do feel at home most in this place out of anywhere in the world. So, and so I continue to be involved with both of my cultures, Unangach and Tlingit. I love them both, and I feel like a chameleon, and I can jump into code switch in both of those and just love it and feel totally normal. It's when I have to step out of those that I feel uncomfortable. I'm here to tell you to talk about education and what we've gone through, and a need for us to wake up. I'm going to do a wake-up call for you. We hear it all the time. We hear sovereign nations. We hear us moving towards justice systems and sovereignty. Our health systems we're taking over, yet we have not taken over our education. We still have abdicated that to the white man. And I'm going to show you examples of that. I'm going to get you to challenge your districts. I hope to plant a seed in you to say, let's change what we're doing in education. We've done some great things in health. Let's do that with education. Before I do that, I want to introduce, thanks, but I'm not here alone. I have a co-presenter today. I'll be doing the first part of this, which is the raw emotional part, and she's going to bring us in on the sweet part called The Way We See. But I would like to introduce Marcella and have her introduce and say where she is from.
Shmoiget, Shimgiget, Sigadam Hanana, Ligagiget, Gabawalsik, Tatni Negeta Gautsap, Edit Gabat Gusk, Luam Godit Nul Nisishum, Sagait Limi Dat Simkshen Dawayu, Ganhada Di Tegu, Su Maslakasla Dio Wakgu, Nigyoks Diwol Zagu, Kanach Klach Diwam Gidakanitsu, Ada aganachta diwam yukdunu, ada ariga nariat diwam gitdauchnu. I have many names. I am Simshan, Haida, and Yupik from Metlakatla, New Metlakatla in Alaska, and today I live in Nigyoks, or place of anchor, or anchorage. My father is Simshan Haida from Prince Rupert, British Columbia, Canada. My mother is Simshan Yupik from New Metlakatla, Alaska. And I have many names. My Shemagik name is Shagait Limi Dat Simkshin, pulls songs from the river Skeena. The Skeena is the river where the Simshans originated from. My Thlinket name is Kanachkla. I've been holding that name from my adopted grandmother, Lucy Roberts from Ketchikan. She adopted me into the Luknakhadi in 1985. We went a little bit out of protocol for her requests as she was diagnosed with cancer, and she wanted her name placed on me while she was still with us. The name was placed on me in 1985, and she didn't walk into the forest until 2010, so she stuck with us for a long time. She was a fighter, and I'm really honored to be holding her name today. My Yupik name is Aganachta. It was given by one of my high school students' mothers, and it means pretty woman. And I also have an Inupiaq name, Ariga Nariat, beautiful things that grow from the land. It was given to me by my husband's family from Shaktoolik. They placed that name on me on our wedding day. And my husband's family explained to me that I came into their family when their dad passed away, and they said I was a good medicine for them, and so that's why they placed that name on me, beautiful things that grow from the land, being our municipal plants. I'm going to be sharing more in the next hour about our cultural curriculum and what we do at Cook-Inlet Native Head Start in Anchorage. Doikshishim, Gidaganits, Ligi, Wrangell, Diwal Anoga, Goidiksha, Nagaltsapshim. Thank you very much to the Tlingit people of Wrangell for letting me be on your land and sharing today. Doikshishim Tatnishnushim. Just a little side note, the Simshans in Canada, I couldn't get any interested in me. The Simshans in Metlakatla I was related to many on our island, so I married an Inupiaq from the north in Shaktoolik. But these are our 5 children. Brandon, he's 22. He blessed us with a grandson last year and turned us into grandparents. On the right, in the blue shirt, that's my oldest, Lemium Hiwash. They're in their senior year at the University of Alaska Southeast in Juneau. In the middle, we have our 13-year-old Alyssa, who's at Baggage Middle School in Anchorage. Then our son, David Watsumu, he just started kindergarten a couple weeks ago in Anchorage. And then our surprise COVID baby is Iowa Ray, who's 2 years old. So, Daayoosh Tatni Shushim.
So I'm going to take the first part of this. It's called The House That Fell, and it just talking about what we're going to do really briefly here. Mine will cover the introduction. We've just done that. Culture and the iceberg, cultural perspectives, and I'm going to talk about 3 A's. I call them assimilation, appropriation, and appreciation. And then challenges to challenges to indigenizing education. Indigenous support systems are traditional support systems and support systems that we have today, and are they equivalent? Are they reliable? And what I'm looking at specifically, support systems for our young people. And then I want to do, it would be wrong of me to leave you with, geez, this is just a dismal world we live in, and education is just a flop for our kids, and what do we have to look forward to? So I end with cultural patterns as an example of, hey, this is what schools should be and could be doing with our children to change the course of where we're going today. Marcella then will come in with, on the second part of this after our little break, with the second presentation, which she'll take the lead on this. It's called The Way We See. It's the curriculum name that our parents chose for the curriculum at Cook Inlet Native Head Start. We radically changed the curriculum from a Western curriculum, and she'll demonstrate all of that when we go into these. We'll talk about mission, the tribal groups that we serve, our goals, how we assess the community and connect with them so that our school is truly a community-based school, implementing the cultural activities in the program, our subsistence cycles, how they play a role in our education, and then our concept we have called Out from Behind the Glass, you'll find out about, culturally and developmentally appropriate practice, and then other things that we do to engage our families, like family nights, Native voices, parent engagement activities, culturally relevant playgrounds, and then finally building an Indigenous learning space, which we've done in the last couple of years at Cook Inlet Native Head Start. We both are Southeasterners, true and blue, but we unfortunately live in Anchorage. I say that because we both miss Southeast and the cultures and community here. So we kind of feed off each other at work all the time and sharing our Southeastern stuff, culture, and food. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, I'm going to ask this question, what is culture? What is it? We know that it's a way of life, and I use an iceberg to demonstrate this thing. And what's really important about culture is that we typically only see the top of this iceberg. And most of my application is gonna be in schools, folks. It's education, that's what my career has been, and my life has been with education. Started here in the 7th grade, and I'll tell you about that terrible experience. But what schools need to do is exactly what this iceberg shows. And it goes from, we tend, as educators, we tend to do the top of the iceberg when it comes to our culture. We talk about, oh, what a beautiful art form that is. We talk about, oh, there's a beautiful regalia. We rarely go into depth of that regalia, for instance. And I'll use an example here in just a minute. Let me just divert a bit and talk about, somebody asked me the other day, what gives you the authority to talk about this? And I said, well, let me tell you. I'm born and raised in Wrangell. I started school here in the 1st grade because back then we didn't have kindergarten, remember? And I started school here, and I went through school here. I finished here except for my January of my senior year, I left and went to Montana and graduated. I then went to college and got a bachelor's at the University of Juneau, so I'm dating myself. It was the University of Southeast now. And I got my bachelor's in elementary education there. Then I went to work. I couldn't get a job for a long time. I couldn't get a job here. I couldn't even get interviews. I managed to get one interview with the Pribilofs. He told me, he goes, well, you've really lived an isolated life. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're from Alaska, you've been educated in Alaska, your college is even Alaskan. I'm looking for well-rounded educators. I'm like, what does that mean? And he says, well, I'll tell you what, you go to the lower 48 and teach for 5 years and come back. If you're successful, I will hire you. I was like, you're kidding me. I said, I know about these. I said, I can at least pronounce all their last names. I said, and I know about the region. I know the culture. I said, you're going to take people. Anyways, they hired people from all over lower 48 because I don't know what it was back in those days, if it was all the administrators with the crew cuts who didn't like us. I don't know. I could not get an interview. My wife could not get an interview. We struggled. I, at one point, sat down in the hallway at a teacher placement job fair and literally teared up thinking, I know everybody thinks we get all this free money to go to school. I got small amounts of money from my tribe. the rest of it, I had to take out loans. I thought, Jesus, I've picked the wrong course. I've picked the wrong profession. I'll never get a job in it. And why is it that I can't get a job? Is it because I'm from Alaska? Backing up to that, in the 7th grade, we had an experience here, and this is where I get emotional, because I pledged to be a teacher to change this and never let these things happen again. We had a teacher, well, first of all, we had one I think he was in the 6th grade, who created paddles. He designed a different paddle every month to spank us with. And he came up with some doozers. I know he had a double paddle that would hit you, and it had holes in it. So the first one hit you, the second one come down and spank your ass the second time. So you're getting twice the load of that paddle. I just don't know what happened, what was going wrong with these people. We had another one who sat outside and smoked constantly, and I never learned anything from him. But my biggest complaint was the teacher who in the 7th grade, we came in, this was October, he was new to the community that year. We came into the classroom, this was October, getting late October, so we all know it's windy, rainy, and it's getting kind of crappy out, and if you're from somewhere else, this is probably a culture shock you're going through. I now know that. At the time, I didn't think of it. We walked into our junior high classroom, this teacher was on top of his desk, pacing back and forth. Now, this is a guy that would wear a suit and tie when he first came. Pacing back and forth, and he was going off. I think he was having a meltdown moment now, but he was going off about our community, saying what a horrible town Wrangell was, what a terrible place. Who would ever choose to live in such a horrible place? And then he turned to us, and his hand came out in his finger. I'll never forget this. He said, shame on you. Shame on every one of your parents, every single one of them, for sending you to school dressed the way you are. Now, we weren't wearing our pants past our ass like they do today or anything like that. We had, those of us from fishing families didn't have a good year that year, so we had used clothes. They were sewed, they were maybe stained, but they were clean, and nobody had anything very offensive. I don't know what he expected, us to be in little suits and ties. I don't know. Little uniforms? I'm not sure. But I was the kid who loved American Indian movement, and I just couldn't wait to get off this island so I could join the Alcatraz and BIA building, and my mother was like, oh, no, you're not going anywhere. Good thing you're stuck here. You're not going anywhere. So I thought, oh, this is my chance to stand up to a man I think is wrong. And I pushed my chair back. Well, first of all, I looked to my sides, and most of my classmates, their heads were down. Leah, who's no longer with us, was sitting on my right side, and she had a little tear coming down. I thought, oh no, I got to defend this. I can't stand this man to do this. So I pushed my chair back and I stood up, and I said, Mr. D, you're wrong. You are wrong. I said, this is our community. This is our place. You pack your suit and tie and your suitcase and get the hell out of Wrangell. Leave us alone. He jumped down off of that desk. He grabbed me by my hair. I had long hair then. In front. He grabbed me by my hair and he threw me out in that hallway and he said, you're out for the week and I don't want you back in here. I was like, yes, I'm glad I don't have to be in that dumb guy's room. So I went and sat in the library and looked at National Geographic for 3 days. But that night when I went home, I was kind of worried because I used to get the belt if I was bad. And I was pretty good in school because I didn't want the belt. But that night I went home and my dad said, sit here. And I had to sit between my mother and my father. The school had called them, and they said, what happened at school today? And I said, well, this is what happened. This is my version. I told them that. And I thought I was going to get, okay, let's go out the back. And I didn't. My dad put his arm on my leg and goes, thank you. Thank you for defending us. And at that point, I thought, oh, you just unleashed a monster. Now there's no stopping me. I'm going to change the world for Alaska Native kids. So that's, I guess, in a long story short, that's why I went into education, and that's what gives me the reason to talk about what I'm going to talk about today. I've raised children, my own 2 children, which you saw pictures of, in the education system, both in the village and in the Anchorage School District. So I've got some legitimate things to say. You may not agree with what I have to say. I will be opening up some wounds today. The whole point is not for, oh, geez, let's cry in our soup, let's feel pity, let's feel sorry for us, and everybody else feels sorry for us. That's not the point. The point is we have to recognize what's happened to us before we can heal and move forward. And a perfect example of that is a high school boy I worked with at the Alaska Native Heritage Center. He came out screaming mad, so mad, I hate being Native. Why? Because all it means is that we're drunk and we beat our wives and kids, and because that's the home he grew up in. That's what he thought was Native. And so it's our responsibility to change this for our children. And so that's where I go with this. That's why I'm talking about this. Now let me go back to culture. Curriculum, we as Native people have abdicated the education of our children to the white man. We have given it to him and said, here, educate our kids. There's a problem with that, though. Curriculum covers vast amounts of surface culture when they deal with the Native cultures. They want to cover lots of culture, but it's all shallow culture. So then they want to jam it into a week or a month. So we have Native Week or we have Native Month. It should not be that way. If our kids are part of the school system, it should be Indigenous culture every day, all day. There should be culture in that school. It doesn't mean we have to learn just Indigenous culture, but it needs to be interwoven into the content of our schools. And in many schools, it is not. Vast majority, it's not. I use a concept called less is more. It's actually Theodore Sizer, an educator. He uses this concept. He goes, less is more, and it doesn't mean that you're teaching less information, you're actually going deeper. You're going to select a small amount of cultural information, and you're going to take those children deep into that. And the reason is we think, oh, we cover lots of shallow culture, the top of the iceberg, and they'll get lots of it. They don't learn about themselves unless we go deep. So it's better to pick a few things and go deep and spend time on it. And I'll use an example coming up here in just a minute. They will find out more as time goes, and I want you to think about this. We only have 12 years to educate them. There is not enough time to give them even everything in Tlingit culture in 12 years. Many of us were in their 60s and we're still learning. So learning is a lifelong process, so let's just think of it as that first. And here is the crux of this. Our worldview is found in the depths of our culture. It's found in the deep areas of our culture. It's not in that shallow culture. What forms the way we see the world is found in our deep culture. And if we don't teach our children that, they will not be thinking the same as us. And we already, folks, don't think the same as our elders and our ancestors because many of us have been colonized in the Western schools. Now, it's the unseen thing of our educators. They usually don't see these parts of our culture. And it's the omitted part in schools. And so when I talk about that, for instance, you'll look at Native cultures or a culture and you go, we look at their games and we look at their food. We maybe look at the way they hunt and fish. And at the top, there's some drumming and dancing. And oh, don't their regalia look beautiful? It's all black and red and has beautiful buttons. But we don't go into a whole lot of depth in things. But where you go deep into this culture, the stuff that we don't typically see, and we as Indigenous people, we don't even usually think about it. It's here. It's just the way we are, and we act this way because we've been raised in it. Weather forecasting, animal behavior, navigation skills, observation skills, on and on, language, terminology, concepts, star knowledge and constellations, building design materials, transportation, genealogy, hunting, fishing, fire, heating, cooking, waste disposal. All of these things are deeper culture that we rarely cover in schools, in education systems. And again, schools have this bad habit of let's do Native Week. Let's do Native Month. How many come from communities that do that? I just am curious. I think it's sad. It's for Indigenous children to be special only 1 week. Really? Your culture is only allowed here 1 week? I guess that's better than when we were kids. Our culture was not allowed in the school at all. So let me use an example of teaching deep culture with this. I'm going to get you out of your comfort zone and take you into Unanga culture, the Aleutian Islands. This is a parka from out there, and it's got deep meaning. Typically in school, you'd say, oh, wow, this is a Aleutian Island. You'd probably say Aleut-style parka. They're hoodless, and they have gut skin embroidery on them, and sea otter and fur seal tassels. The garment is made out of bird skin, and it's reversed. And it uses two primary colors, the basic white or yellowish color and that off-red rust color. And you might get something like I've heard teachers say the tassels were created because it's rainy out there, and when they shake their tassels, it runs all the water off. I thought, that is so stupid. No, it's like, that's not the reason these are on there, and I'll go into depth here now with this. If I was to teach children this, and this is a very quick a thing, I'd spend a whole week or two just on this one garment. On this garment, starting at the very top of this thing, it's obviously hoodless. Yes, it is. It's reversible, and bird feathers are on the inside. And the reason we make them reversible is because of the weather. On colder, dry days, you would wear it this way. Your feathers would be on the inside. On wetter, warmer days, you'd flip it, and then the feathers would be on the outside. Ha! The tassels are already in the inside now if you flip it, so that's kind of mutes that issue about using the tassels to detassel water. I don't get that. But anyways, then there's some other really important things about this. Yeah, it is gut skin embroidery, but what you need to know is that embroidery is unique to your maternal side. Only your mother, her sisters, and her children, and your cousins on the maternal side are allowed those patterns. Those are how they identified family relations throughout the Aleutians. So you could take a person from Attu, put them in Akitan across the chain. They would know who they could date and who they couldn't just by looking at patterns on clothing. And then each of those patterns have traditional stories and meanings to them as well. The other part to this is those tassels you see. Those are sewn on, and they're representative of the first arrows that were shot into our ancestor. Our first ancestor, when he pulled the arrows from his body, he would bleed, and he bled out that red oxide color, and he would lay his blood on the earth, his wound on the earth to heal himself. So that red oxide is used to represent that first ancestor's blood. So now we're getting into some deep spiritual meaning for our young people to understand. And as I go through this, then if you look closer, there's hair, gray hair attached on the lower part of this parka. That's a very old tradition in Unanga culture. On your deathbed, you would cut your hair and give it to your descendants, who would then sew it into their parkas and who would have a piece of you next to them forever. Kind of a way to keep your spirit close. Hair was very not to be cut unless you were mourning or on your deathbed. And if you were killed in war, then your hair would have been cut and given out to your descendants as well. So the three bars on this go back to the very traditional story, the creation of man, and that first kalangik, that first ancestor I'm talking about, that's his regurgitation. And it's not vomit, it's regurgitation. It's where you regurgitate out like a bird. Is a story where he healed his son who was severed by an enemy, his neck, and was bleeding out, and he saved him. And so those three bars are always on every old traditional parka. So I could go on in this, but what I've done is I've talked about insulating factors in here. I've talked about spiritual factors. There's also stories associated with the moon. They're called the moon sister. I would go into those stories and those different styles or different colors of the parka that the moon wears and the different waxing, waning, and full. And then I would go into the terminology. Sakh, it's called sakh. Simply in Unangak, it means bird. Why do you think that is? Because it's a bird skin. So when you put on your bird, you become a bird basically in this. The deep meaning is what I'm after here. And you don't need to remember this stuff here. But what I'm getting to you is that you need to push in your schools, you need to push with culture, deep culture. Don't get them to do just shallow culture. Go deep. It's extremely important because it's how we form our worldviews. It's how we see the world. And we do see the world, and I'm going to show you we do see differences. We have cultural lenses. These glasses we put on, they're cultural. And actually, we don't even need the glasses. We're raised in this. We don't think about it, but we wear these lenses. And so we see the world differently, and here's a perfect example. In Unanga culture, my mother's culture, the Aleut culture, they really struggle with education and the concept of teacher and student. They really have a hard time with that because in Western system, the teacher is a sage who sits upon the stage, and you are the student, and you sit there and absorb this information from this wonderful sage, correct? And we had a couple teachers like that, Sumi. This, however, is not the worldview of Unangak educators, and I know it's not for Tlingit either, or Haida or Tsimshian. What our worldview is that an educator is a facilitator. And so in Unangam Tunu, to teach and to learn is one word, a chirilich. I cannot separate those two words. I can't pull them apart. So we can with a borrowed words, but I can't in my own traditional worldview of education. So that's important now when we talk about how we see the world and the way things happen in the world. And here's a perfect example. This is not even Alaska Native or anything. This is Western and Middle Eastern. The gal on the left side, or the no clothes on, she's saying that everything's covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated world that Muslim woman lives in. The Muslim woman is looking at her and she's got the same thought. What a cruel, nothing covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated world she lives in. Because you know she's doing that basically for the males. So it's perspective, folks. We need to step back and we say, okay, wait a minute. And this is what I'm asking educators to do. Stop and realize your children have a different worldview than you do, a different perspective. What bothers me about educators is teachers who get up and say, I teach every one of my children as if they are the same. They are not. Not even if the kids are of one culture, they are exactly the same. So don't teach them as if they're the same. Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to prove this to you. Some of you know this because you've been in my sessions before, so if you know it, don't raise your hand. Look at this pattern. I want you to tell me real quickly, identify the pattern. Raise your hand when you know the pattern. Come on. You should know this by now. This is a learned pattern. We learned this, and we've learned it through education. This is my point I'm proving to you. I can show this pattern to anybody in preschool. My Head Start babies will tell me exactly the difference in this pattern. Now you're going, wait, how can a Head Start baby know that pattern? How many of you started going A, B, C, D, E, F, trying to figure out some kind of a numerical pattern type thing? We've been taught to do that. We've been taught to do that. This is so simple, folks. If you haven't figured it out yet, you're going to go, oh my gosh. The top line are straight lines. The bottom lines have curves. That's a simple pattern. That's all there is to that, folks. We see the world differently. This is more of a literate versus non-literate. So non-literate children will look at this and they can see those. We can't because we're literate, but the big thing is we've been trained to look for these mathematical or special letter patterns that doesn't exist in this. Now I really want to show you this. Now we're going to talk about perspectives, and this is what educators use in schools that really runs the gamut with me. We have different lenses, and this is a perfect one. We talk about Thanksgiving in schools all the time, yet we teach the wrong message. In fact, I was very upset when I went to college and really learned what truly did happen at Thanksgiving. I was like, my goodness, can't they have just taught me the truth in school? In this one, I want you to look at the pictures really carefully and notice that, oh, it looks like a great Thanksgiving. Everybody's coming together and joining this. But as an Indigenous person, I look at this and I go, it screams to me, it stinks. I want to rip it off the wall and burn it. And what I'm saying about that is, first of all, we all know that the Pilgrims had nothing. In fact, they were dying off, and it was the Indigenous people who actually kind of saved them, and then only to be turned around and had their heads lobbed off because of it. So, but in this, it shows pretty much that, first of all, the Pilgrims have really colorful clothing, if you notice, compared to the Indigenous people. We just got like buckskin and a couple white feathers on. But I'm like wondering, where's all that beautiful wampum that those East Coast people have? I'm not seeing in this picture. But anyways, the Pilgrims have all these nice colors, which maybe it was taught wrong, but I thought they were just black and white clothing and kind of drab. I could be wrong. What really bothers me about this picture, though, is that it's obviously in the white man's community. They didn't go to the Native community for the feast. There's a table. Who's at the table? Not your guests. Just the white people are at the table. That's kind of bothersome to me. And the ladies in the back are kind of looking around and gawking at the natives. And then I want you to see the native lady in the back is being escorted over to the native section. I want you to look at the natives. They're sitting on the floor. I'm not on the floor. They're on the ground. They're on the ground with a dog. There's a dog bowl and scraps just to the left of the dog. You can probably see. And then the natives are handed food from a plate, and you're just expected to grab out with your hand. And then there's the guy in the hat, the native in the hat, hidden like this. I don't know, he's getting ready to warfare or something, ready to kill white men or something. I don't know. It just does not look like a friendly meal to me. And I was like, I would not want to go to this dinner, thank you. And if I was there, I'd get up and walk away. I want to show you, I use some videos to help me explain some of this. So I want to use this. This is about the first Thanksgiving. And this is a black lady, actually, who addresses it. And I like using other people to help address this. And there is humor in this, folks.
And I'm thankful for my kindergarten class who made these wonderful crafts to celebrate Thanksgiving.
After the Native Americans helped the Pilgrims survive their first winter in America, the Puritans invited them to share the first Thanksgiving.
Oh, these are adorably wrong,
A 5-year-old made that.
based off of the lies that you taught them.
Excuse me?
Oh, it's not your fault. These are full of half-truths and historical propaganda.
I thought the Native Americans and the Pilgrims were like besties or whatever.
At best, the Pilgrims and Wampanoags could be described as political allies. By the time the Pilgrims showed up, not only were 2/3 of the Massachusetts tribes completely wiped out by European slave owners and diseases, the Pilgrims were constantly at war with the indigenous people and routinely tortured them.
But what about Squanto, the Native American who learned English to help out the Pilgrims?
He was actually a slave that was hauled off to Europe, and then he learned English so that he could escape.
But they did celebrate it every year, right?
Not exactly. The next one was 16 years later, and unfortunately, it was because the Puritans were celebrating the massacre of the Pequot tribe. Back then, Thanksgiving was also for families, specifically murdering them.
Okay, we get it. History's awful. The Puritans were terrible. And now we have to let our children know that the holiday started with tons of killings. Happy?
Well, we actually have just about everything wrong with the Thanksgiving myth. Definitely didn't wear these buckle hats. Didn't land on Plymouth Rock. And as for that turkey,
Oh, no, not turkey.
more like venison, fowl, and eel.
Oh,
Who cares about how this stupid holiday got started anyway?
Exactly. In George Washington's 1789 Thanksgiving Proclamation, the settlers aren't mentioned not even once. Thanksgiving wasn't celebrated nationwide until 1863 when this guy declared it a national holiday during the Civil War in order to bring the country together. That's why all of our foods are from the 19th century.
So Lincoln came up with the whole Indian pilgrim story.
Nope. That myth didn't catch on until the 1900s after we had fought and killed all the Native Americans. And then we put it in textbooks as fact. Because America. But the food is really good. And if you ignore all the terrible history, like, the murdering, the raping, the pillaging, it's still kind of a great holiday.
So the Mayflower is a lie.
Why do we eat cranberry sauce?
What about stuffing?
Is Black Friday really just a capitalist conspiracy to get poor people to buy things so we can't truly live out a populist revolt?
Or is it?
really in America? Is this really in America?
And what about corn?
I am never telling you the truth ever again.
So perspective is really important for us. What about this guy? What do we know about him? Somebody just raise your hand. Give me something. Give me something good about him. Top good stuff in school. Yes, sir.
What do I know about him?
Yeah, give me one good thing. What were taught about him in school?
One good thing. Well, I think he was a great man.
Okay.
I can go on and on.
Right. Because you have a very good positive perspective of him. Very good. Yes, sir.
He was trying to send the blacks to Central America or South America.
Yeah, there's some things about him that are not good. In fact, as an indigenous American, I would say he's next to Stalin. I'll go that far and say this. Yes?
He ordered the largest mass hanging in the United States of America.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. Yeah, we're told how great he is. He's a great guy, the great emancipator, and he did. He united the country from the south and the north. For a white man, it was a great thing. For the black man, he freed them from slavery, whatever that reason was. We've heard economic, we've heard other reasons, but he still freed them. That's a great thing. What did he do for us? He passed the Homestead Act, which made the land west of the Mississippi open to any white homesteader. Your land was no longer your land, folks. And then he did the Mankato mass execution, the largest execution to date in American history. They wanted him to kill 303 of them. He refused only because he was worried how Europe would respond. He said, I'll kill 30-some of them, I'll hang 30 of the bastards, but the rest I will hunt down and kill in time. The reason they did this, the sad part about this, they signed a treaty to go to the reservation and they were supposed to be promised food. Their women and children were starving. 5 men escaped the reservation and hunted a farmer's cow, took the cow back and fed their people, and they don't even think that the 5 men were the ones hung in this terrible thing. So again, it's that perspective, and I'm just going to show you a quick video here. This is a great one. You've probably seen this if you're into 1491s. Oh, where's our sound? On the bottom. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Sound guys, help.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. I think slavery is wrong, morally and politically. I desire that it should be no further spread in these United States, and I should not object if it should gradually terminate in the whole Union. Indians? Let the bastards hang.
I think it was a douche. I let this part run because it's their names. So how do our kids think the world sees them? I often wondered, how do
you
our...
want to know what I've been doing for the last 20 years that changed my life? I've been eating oatmeal.
You're not doing it, dude. Yeah. I didn't even play him, but... Sorry, guys. So my question was, how do kids today think the world sees them? And this has to do a big impact on how they feel, their self-esteem. And so I did a Google, and I challenge you to do this, and I looked in broader groups. So I didn't look at us as, Tlingit or Alaska Native. I looked in our broad group, like Native American, Asian American, White American, Black American. I looked at those categories, and I Googled it and took a snapshot picture. And I want you to look at these and look for themes you see. And I want you to start thinking, as an Indigenous child, where do you see yourself in this? So here we go. I Googled white Americans. This is what I see. The patterns I picked out, I see families, I see patriotism, and I definitely see life in the world today, right now, here in America. I think you can not dispute that with me. Black Americans, less family pictures, but I do see still very current in America today, political activism, it looks like, going on. And again, very much as if it is today. There's some history there. We can see the discrimination or anti-riot movements going on there, but they're very much a part of America today. If I'm an Asian American, I Google it, what do I see? Lots of family stuff. Again, heavy patriotism. I see they're very diverse culture group of people. I learned that from this. I see, again, there's family themes, there's patriotism, and again, right here in America today. What about Latino Americans? Do the same thing, very patriotic. I see a lot of issues that are going on that we hear about today, immigration issues, etc., but very political and American patriotism, very family-oriented. And a connection to their indigenous past, that picture down in the bottom, which I thought was interesting because it shows that they are, again, a culture that's here and vital today in America, but they have a connection to the past. So the next group I looked at was Pacific Islanders. What do they represent? Again, families, ancient culture, but practice today. Culture very important, history is important to them, but again, very much in today, and you see patriotic stuff going on there. Native Americans, what do you see? I see a bunch of people in buckskins, braids, feathers, ready to go to war. I see very few family pictures, and no current, really, of the whole family. I see one family picture in the bottom where the child's X'd out. I don't know what that means. Does it look like we're here today? Do you think the educators see our children unless they're in their button robes and their buckskins? They're not seeing them, folks. That's what this means. This message tells our children we don't belong here today. We are a people of the past. This is what they're teaching our children. This is the message that's coming out to our children. And so I don't want to do a long history thing because I'm really going to go into what schools have done to us now. But this is the history of America and our indigenous relationship with America and how they've treated us. And the real heavy point here I want you to look at is assimilation, because that's where I'm going to take off. We think assimilation is over. It's not. It's still very much a part of our education system, folks. I call it the 3 A's as part of this presentation. It's assimilation, appropriation, and appreciation, and the differences between the two of those. In assimilation, we saw this in the very early years when they took our children to boarding schools and left from their traditional lifestyle and going into a very modern world, very modern lifestyle. Cultures do this to survive at times. Others, you're forced to do it for all different reasons. I look at these pictures and I get sad. I look at them and I think, how sad you look in your Western gear and how beautiful you looked in your traditional. And we think it's, usually just the lower 48 Indians. It's not. It happened right here in this place. In Alaska, we've been in this battle, and you heard Richard talk about battles yesterday. We've been in for a long time. We're still doing this, and we have been. I want you to look at this picture. I want you to look at how unhappy those Eskimo children look. None of them look very happy. And I've taught in Eskimo villages. I guarantee you they're smiling, happy children. They're really happy kids. Look at those kids. Not one of them is smiling. Not one of them. It's 1914, November 1914, according to the calendar up there. And you can't see it right now, but there's a sign in the back on the wall, and it says, "Please do not speak Eskimo." So, of course, these kids aren't happy. They're not able to speak English even, because they don't know it. They're not allowed to communicate in this classroom. This was a famous thing in rural Alaska in the villages. Teachers would come in with apples or apple juice and tell kids in the school classroom, "I don't hear you speak a word of your native language this week. You can come to the party on Friday and have apple juice." And kids in the village love apple juice and apples. They love that stuff. I'm going to quit using my language so I can go have apple juice. This is what teachers actually did to our children. Education's purpose. The reason we have education, it's in all societies, and we've had it in our ancient societies, we have education. It's to teach reasoning. How do we think? Critical thinking. It's to promote the health and social political institutions of your organization or your nation, and it's to indoctrinate youth. That's my point. We've given our education over to Western schools. They're indoctrinating our youth into whose culture and into whose society? Ours? And I know we live in a dual society, and I don't expect them to not teach Western culture in the schools. That's important. But our children need to be part of our culture as well. The Davis case in Sitka, which was presented yesterday, I believe, we've been fighting this battle in education for a long time. They couldn't go to the white man's school because they attended ku'ich and they picked berries. That should exclude a lot of white people from going to the white school even. So, but this is the attitude, the man's attitude at the time, that we were just people that needed to be taken care of because we are ignorant and living in the dark. So was it really education or cultural genocide? And is it stopped? I ask you that, and I ask you that because I'm going to ask people in Head Start, you have to do a thing called class. It's an assessment, a test that they come in and review you on. Reviewers from Mississippi or somewhere else come in, and they will sit down in an Indigenous room, and they will watch interactions, and they expect your classroom to be filled with chatter and talk, lots of talking. In fact, they don't like to hear any silence. But we all know that in many of our cultures, we just sit silent sometimes and communicate with our bodies. We're happy with that period of silence. In Yupik cultures, you sit at the table to eat, and you're not supposed to talk. You're supposed to be giving reverence to those animals that you're eating. Yet, when they come into a classroom, our Yupik immersion room, we lose points in that consistently because we are graded on a white standard. So the other part of this is appropriation. And this is the part that educators tend, or people get worried about. And Native people, we get all upset about it. Recently, the Salmon Sisters and their Kuspuk dress they made, I don't know if you've been following that or not. It's all part of appropriation. And that's when you take something from somebody's culture and you use it in a different way or in a disrespectful way. An example would be taking traditional tattoos from designs from Southeast Alaska and putting them on somebody, painting them on someone's face to sell sunglasses, for instance, in New York. That would be appropriation. I'd be taking something from here and using that. The same thing, mascots are part of appropriation, and the research shows how bad it is for our kids to be exposed to it. And I know some of us, that's my team, but geez, guys, let me just show you one video here. I think we're running out of time. I think we're out of time, so I'm probably not going to be able to run through my videos. Let me get towards the end of this. So then there's appreciation. And appreciation is when you're asked to participate in a culture. And that's totally different. So when I take from your culture and use it for my purpose, that's appropriation. I'm stealing something from you and using it for me. If I am asked by you to participate, that's totally different, and that's where we need to go. This is an example of Beyonce. She's appropriating. I first saw this picture, I thought it was a beautiful Middle Eastern woman. It's not. She was selling an album, and she has nothing to do with those clothing. It's appropriation. An example from outside of our native cultures. What are the problems, challenges for indigenizing our education? Well, it's to inculcate youth into society, and our youth are being inculcated into Western society because when you write curriculum, you cannot do it without being biased. You write curriculum from your culture. So all of our kids are immersed in curriculum across the state that is being written by Westerners in the lower 48. They're teaching them their values. I guarantee you there's no Tlingit value being taught. I guarantee it. And so it's been used as a tool by colonizers to diminish three things in our cultures. And there are three things that have not been allowed in our schools, and that's our indigenous languages, our ceremonial life, and our knowledge systems. All three of those things they have worked hard to deteriorate and diminish. Why? Because that's where we get our worldview, folks. That has to come back in. Then there's a research versus practice-based. I won't go into that too much right now. And so I want to end, this part of this thing right here, and this question here with you is, our kids already experience higher success in schools that are culturally relevant to them. Schools that are not, we see where the research shows that they do terrible in those curricula. So I'm going to ask us, are we colonized or are we sovereign natives? We keep screaming sovereignty, yet we let them educate our kids. And we get in on the board once in a while and we can change things, but it's a huge system to change. So I ask you that, and I just want to plant that seed in your mind. Where can we go with this? And so I use this picture to this demonstration. It's called The House That Fell. And it's where are we at as people today, Native people? And you can use this as any culture, any group of people, a whole community, a nation, or specifically families. And where do we get our strength? Traditionally, we got them from our family, our clan, our village, and our nation. You hear it in the way we introduce ourselves. That's where we get our strength, folks. We need to return to that and build that clan system so that we have those strengths. So our young people have the mental health supports and don't have to go to the outside sources for those, because we do have our own mental health support systems, our traditional ways of doing things, folks. They're legitimate. We've been told they're bad and wrong. They are not, and that's what we need for health. The effects of colonization we can see in our houses even as time began. Our houses went from traditional to more Western-looking houses. Shoot, in my mother's village, my grandfather was chief. The chief's house got painted white. Where do you think they got that idea from? We just love to colonize. I mean, we all got sucked up in colonization. And even those houses started to deteriorate after time, and our houses start to fall in. Let me do a different example of this, a stick figure example which anybody can relate to. So, and I'll kind of tell the story. As our people migrated down the rivers and came into these areas, they discovered that there were resources. And as the resources were being utilized and used, we created social systems. And our social systems were based on, we had economics because we controlled all the resources in the region. We developed traditions in our cultures. This is over hundreds and thousands of years. Spirituality encompassed all parts of our lives. And we had an education system, our uncles. We had the education system, folks. We just didn't have big public schools, but we had it. Governance, we had our own way of governance, and we've heard them talk about traditional governance versus modern governance and what is accepted by the government. Language, that's supposed to be a totem pole outside. Language covered all parts of our society. Our languages were rich. We created our own new words. We didn't need to borrow words. Our arts were part of our life. They weren't something that went on the doctor's wall. And our health was good. We had wonderful health. In the Aleutians, some of the mummies were 100 years old in pre-contact. But when the Westerners, so when you have this, you got prestige. The Joneses, and I don't mean the Charlie Joneses or anybody, but the Joneses next door are looking at you and going, wow, you guys got it all together. Your house is strong. Or the nation next door, you guys, wow, Shkatquan is really strong. You have prestige, folks, and when you have that prestige, you have values that are strong. Those values are intact, and they're being passed on to your young people. Your morals are there, and this is great. You have the concept of we. We even hear an American thing, we the people. I'm talking really fast here because I'm trying to hurry. Pride, and then pride is there. We're so proud of who we are as Native people. I grew up in a time when kids were not always proud. I grew up with a girl here who was asked once, she was full-blooded Tlingit. She was asked, are you Tlingit? No, I'm a Hawaiian. I asked her later, why do you say that? She goes, because nobody likes us. This is how our people feel. Children grow up feeling, and this then is what causes some of those bad things. But the prestige, over a period of time, Westerners came and our resources get diminished, and pretty soon we lose our resources. We lose control of them, and what happens to our house? It starts to shake, and we start losing things. Our social structure changes. Our economics, we have no more economics, basically. Our traditions change. Our language is replaced with another language. Our education system no longer is intact. Our governance is now changed to a tribal system government, which is totally different. Spirituality is gone and replaced. Our health is diminished terribly at a period of time. And our arts, again, no longer used as a utilitarian in our life, but now sit on the walls of dentists and doctors. So with that, your house now looks like this. Every one of us comes from a house like this. And so do you have this bright prestige and sun going? No. What develops now is shame with our young people. They become ashamed of who they are and their culture, because if you're looking at your house and it's falling apart and the Joneses over there is really intact, gee, what's wrong with us? What's wrong with me? They don't even know where the problem is. The blame goes. And with that shame comes guilt. We often blame ourselves. It's our fault because we're natives, and we don't even know why. And a low self-esteem. And the worst of all, and the reason I do this is because a young boy fished commercially with me in Bristol Bay, sat netted for years. He committed suicide, and we had to pull his mother out of his casket. And I said, I'd never see this again. I'll work to make this stuff never happen. And so the self-destructive behavior in our young people happens. And we have the highest rate of suicide, we have the highest disease rate, we have the highest dysfunctional rate of everything. We have, I don't even want to use swear words, but we are at the bottom of the pile, folks, in this, and we're America's first people. We should not be there. That's not our place. And how do we get out of this? How do we build strength in our families and our children? How do we make this house strong again? We can't do it by ourselves. We need educators to help us do that. We need this house brought back to this strength, and we need to do this all together. So it's all part of culturally responsive education. I'm just going to end quickly with this patterns. So I had to learn a pattern in school here, which I never understood, but one of the things I loved was cultural patterns, and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, taught me when she lived with us, Tatiana taught me a lot about her Unangak patterns. And so I know that in the top of the hats, for instance, you take all the ivory off and it's a circle, concentric circles that go down. You see these circles everywhere. And then you see it in even cultures that are outside of Unangak. And even here in Wrangell, she showed me this and said it's our same symbol. This symbol in Unangak culture means the creation of man and our migration. That we have a long migration story. And that's what that symbolized to me. I knew this pattern. I knew it in and out. Then as I got older, I saw the pattern everywhere. And you take that circle pattern, you take that circle that goes like that spiral, and you cut a line in it, and you run it out, and it makes this running wave-looking pattern. It's the same pattern, but extended out. I saw it everywhere. I started seeing this pattern all over the place. I was like, oh my gosh, what is that pattern? And then I got to college and I even saw a weather report that had that same dang pattern going, that swirling pattern. And then the tradition, Unangak, is we fell out of the sky. Maybe we did. And so what my daughter came back from AI and said, I got something to show you, Dad, about your patterns. And I said, what? She goes, I want to show you something that's really important. But she connected me with my traditional patterns and modern mathematics, which no math teacher was able to do that up here. In fact, I had a math teacher up here who told me that in 4th grade, then when I raised my hand, that what's wrong with you? You're just like your uncle. I never asked another question in math again. I almost didn't make it through college even for it. But it was a simple thing. This pattern I'm showing you is this Fibonacci sequence. Had a math teacher connected me and shown that my culture had a place in mathematics, I would have loved math. I would have found something in school that was meant to me because I loved culture. In fact, I just want to end with this part before Marcelo will be picking up with the next part. I want to say that I had great educators here, but I had some not good educators as well. I had a 5th grade teacher who I loved dearly who encouraged me to be Native, and it was okay to do my reports about Native chiefs and people, and I just went off on it. I did it. I had a principal in high school who was actually Indigenous, and we talked about shame and all that, I think he lived from that period of time. I wanted to go to work at JOM Center in my senior year, to work with Frank Young, Marlita Wallace, Marge Bird, Haynes DeWitt, that were all down here doing cultural work. I wanted to come down and help them prepare their classes for when the kids get out. The principal came to me and pulled me out of government and said, what the hell is this? I said, I want to go and be their teacher aide. He goes, there's no future in culture. I'm not letting you do that. You can go down and pump gas at Wilcox. I said, no, I don't want to pump gas. He goes, then I'm staying in school and wasting my time, I guess, because I'm not going to go do that. I didn't want to be a gas pumper when I grew up. I wanted to be somebody in culture and education. So with that, I just want to, I'm going to let you end a video with, it's called Bad Indian. Because, well, maybe I won't.
Just look at the camera for a second before you turn.
Crawford taught good Indians and bad Indians. I always grew up wondering, I guess.
Ma keni ma taloa ika ali okchalenchi.
All right, if you pause, then that means that you want me to feed you along.
Yeah, I was told by those old ones that every song has a special time. All right, let's go. We got it. Let's go again. Take 2.
I was told by those old ones
that every song has a special time and a place where it's sang.
This is our song.
And this is our time.
You used to say the only good Indians were dead Indians.
I must be no good at
being
No good at being Indian.
No good.
Be no good at being Indian.
Because I feel alive and kicking. We are the bastard reject children
Of manifest destiny.
the offspring of fornicating aimsters.
Raised by our grandparents who told us
not to confuse being warriors with gangsters.
The Edward Curtis groupies get jazzed by anyone fitting the bill. And America gets juiced
by every bury my heart at Walmart.
Bury my heart at Walmart.
By every bury my heart at Walmart film.
Here I stand before you, this crowd of nations.
This life of sanctions.
And awkward patience like 500 BIA buildings versus a father's unfiltered hate.
right next to the IHS building with a 2.5-week wait.
With the cinder block battlefield, where few are left standing.
And the people it's failing?
its marginalized estate.
I am armed to the teeth
with words from the ivory tower.
And those good Indians told me.
It's borrowed power.
If I talk loud enough, if I talk clear enough, that I would be heard.
Ma keni ma anumpa hiket ali taloa.
That for some, talking is singing.
And that for some, singing is praying.
Ta'apa tomobata, nan subukata ananhia, etekwapa pita toive.
But I guess that depends on who's doing the talking.
And I guess that depends on who is doing the listening.
Tali ako ko So understand me in English.
You have been robbed of your tongues.
The taproot of thought in the middle of resisting.
In the middle of resisting, the language got caught, and she only shows her face during ceremony.
Like she's ashamed of her scars.
Like what she has to say is never really heard
At all.
And the violence she knows is enough to never sing again.
But I killed the cameraman.
And I stripped him of his lens.
I photographed the body and asked him to forgive.
Forgive me as I cut out your tongue.
Forgive me as I put you in this powdered wig.
Forgive me as I put your body in a museum.
Forgive me of all my sins.
For not being a good Indian. The balls of your forefathers will be traded for whiskey.
To fuel the Molotov cocktails.
To be tossed at your cities.
And the breasts of your mothers
Severed and bloody.
Will be sold to the freak show.
Will be sold to the freak show for the revelers' money.
Your children will witness their whole world collapse.
As kidnapped siblings.
Must erase names off maps.
So forgive me of all my sins.
For not being a good Indian.
I was taught better than that.
I have more respect than that.
I have more respect than that.
More respect.
I have more respect than that.
So there is no history book with my story.
There is no newspaper to give me my glory.
Because no one has heard this language in years, except Kokopelli,
Dreamcatchers, and a trail of beers.
My voice is a smallpox blanket
that spreads like fire on the prairie.
Infecting both fist and hatchet.
In the spirit.
In the spirit.
In the spirit.
In the spirit of fucking crazy.
Talk about some of the language.
In America,
So I just want to, we're going to gear up and get ready for our next part of this, which Marcelo will take. It's the sweetness of this. It's what we're doing at Cookila Native Head Start to change that horrible history we've been through and those sad things. And we're doing some really awesome things there. I really have to say we challenged the federal government in an Indigenous curriculum. They told Head Start was not able to do that. We challenged, we did it, we pushed ahead, and they came and reviewed. They said this is what all Indigenous communities should do. So this was the sad part about it. I don't know if you have any questions or any comments. Now's the time while Marcelo goes and sets up for the rosy part coming up. Yeah.
Did you go through like the locally designed option?
No.
Okay.
We did.
Okay.
I know they expect you to use a curriculum.
Right.
Head Start expects you to purchase a curriculum and then you pay yearly to use that curriculum. With curriculum created somewhere for people, children, somewhere else. So their values are in there, but ours are not. And in Head Start, so you have to do this, and they tell you have to have research-based curriculum. And we said, we have practice-based, because we practice things for thousands of years. It may not be research. The problem with research on Indigenous education is we're too small of groups to do it, and they can't put us in a collective group because we're all too very different. And so it doesn't come out statistically very good. So we challenged them, and we actually, the way we did it, we'll talk about it in a little bit, we used their framework. And we said, we're getting to where you want them to be at, and we're doing it through now a cultural lens, through cultural activities. And we hired consultants to come in and actually education consultants, PhDs to come in and work with us in aligning that to make it workable. Otherwise, we probably would have been hammered by them. Question? Little? So then what we did was for the 10 years we've been working on curriculum, and it's every year, teachers, everybody, culture bearers, everyone works on it. She'll talk about it here. Oh.
All right. So this is the lighter side of our programming with Cook Inlet Native Head Start, and I'm the traditional culture coordinator. I joined Head Start as a teacher in 2004 to 2006. I left for a little bit and I worked at the Alaska Native Heritage Center through their after-school high school program, and then I journeyed more into their language department where I felt I had a stronger need to be. And then when the funding for their language program ended, I moved back to Head Start as traditional culture coordinator, and I'll talk more about my position there. And so I have the honor and privilege of working with Ethan as our Head Start director. And just want to start with our mission statement. Cook-Inlet Native Head Start's mission is building strong foundations with Alaska Native families through Alaska Native cultures and education. So this is just a map of our Alaska Native languages, a little breakdown of them with the 5 major culture groups, and with the Alaska Natives living in Anchorage, the population that we serve. And we work with children from 0 to 5 years old. Cook-Inlet Native Head Start's vision is strong Native children and their families reaching their full potential. So currently we have 2 sites. We serve 259 families. 194 of those are our Head Start children, and 65 are our early Head Start children. If you're not familiar with Head Start, early Head Start is 0 to 2 years old, and then they transition to our Head Start classroom, which is 3 to 5, in preparing them for kindergarten. We also have a home-based program that my 2 younger children have gone through, and that's kind of gearing you up from the mother being pregnant in preparing for a baby to come into the world, and then activities and helping them develop before they can enter in Head Start. And we're also fortunate to have a Yukdun immersion classroom where our students are learning Yukdun with 3 teachers. I believe only one of them are fluent in the language, and the other 2 are learners, and they work with our students in that classroom as well. This is just a breakdown of the population of the cultures that we serve at Cook-Inlet Native Head Start. A lot of research has been done with language learners in the Anchorage community, and the breakdown from that research was the most population were wanting the Yupik language. Second came Inupiaq, third was Tlingit, and 4th was Unanga. So based on that information, we were able to get funding to have our Yupik immersion classroom. We would love it to have immersion classrooms in all the languages for all the families that we serve. But currently, it's hard to find teachers to work with this age group, and it's hard to find speakers who are physically able to get on the floor and play and teach the children as well. We'd love it if we can get an Inupiaq immersion classroom as well. If that doesn't work out, we'd love to get, I'll throw this out there now, we'd love to get Tlingit teachers to come and create an immersion classroom for the families that we serve.
Okay, we're trying to steal.
We are recruiting. Just put that out there. We have openings. So this just highlights some of our goals. I'm not going to read it word for word. But I want to highlight and get to what we do. We assess our community each year to see what they would like to see within our programming. Dancing and singing is always real high interest with our families, arts and crafts, Native languages, Native Youth Olympics, bringing the Native games to the classroom, traditional foods. A lot of our families don't know how to live a subsistence lifestyle, and unfortunately when they come through enrollment, a lot of them will know the corporation that they belong to, but they don't necessarily know the culture that they belong to. And so we really try to help guide the families for those who are growing up in the Anchorage area and help them learn more about who they are, not just with the children, but with the families that we serve as well. So the way we're developing and implementing our culture curriculum at Cook-Inlet Native Head Start is a very long process. It took 8 long years for us to get our culture curriculum together. It's still being molded We currently have it online to where our teachers can put their assessments into the rubrics that we've created with our cultural curriculum. And I came right in the middle. They're in their 4th year of working on their culture curriculum, so I could see a lot of the hard work that they put into putting this together, and we're able to implement it now into the classrooms. And we try to use our cultural values implemented with our curriculum as well. One of those values is seeing connections, all things are related. We work on the outcome framework with the Alaska Early Learning Guidelines, which helps be the base and foundation for our culture curriculum. And we're really excited to get to share it with other programs within the state. And we had our review team with the Office of Head Start that came and visited our program, and a lot of the reviewers on the team were wanting to have access to that as well, so we're really excited to share it. Again, our Alaska Native values are a big part of the foundation of our culture curriculum. And with Head Start, our early learning outcome framework has central domains for approaches to learning, social and emotional development, language and literacy, cognition, and perceptual, motor and physical development. So those fine motor and large motor physical activity. So this is just our staff at the beginning process of getting our cultural curriculum to put together, working long hours and trying to make sure that the wording of our curriculum is culturally based and understood with examples. This is an example of our social emotional rubric, and you can see the different stages with the cultural value: know who you are, live carefully, pray for guidance, show respect to others. And we have the indicators listed there that'll help the teachers in guiding the progress of the student. This is our cognition sample with the different stages as well. And then our large motor or fine motor physical part of our domains, just examples of those. I want to get into how we are implementing culture into the classroom. Like Ethan said, Alaska Native cultures are celebrated and honored every day, all year within our program, and that's seen inside and out of our program. We have a culturally appropriate and appreciated playground at both of our sites. Right here we have a picture of the Athabascan food cache where the food was stored in the winter time, and of course it has the slide on the back side so our kids can play on that. And the way, with the exception of our Yupik immersion classroom, the way we honor each culture is we study a different culture each month. And this changes each school year because we try to rotate the cultures because we know that their seasonal cycles for what they do for subsistence is different month to month. And we try to rotate and honor all the culture groups at least twice in the school year. So right now we're in September, we're learning salmon fishing and honoring the Yupik and the Chupik cultures. And then next month we'll be learning about whale hunting and honoring the Inupiaq and St. Lawrence Island Yupik. Previously, all of our classrooms had cultural items in the classroom from every culture that was there from August all the way to May, and it got a little confusing for some of our teachers who weren't Alaska Native. They would get some of the items mixed up on what culture that it belonged to, and so we tried to fix that, and we're piloting a new way of teaching culture in the classroom right now. So in May, I collected all the cultural items that I do inventory with at the end of the school year, and they had me separate them by culture. And then once we did that, our staff this summer took them by culture and put them in 13 different totes because that would be dispersed to the 13 classrooms that we have within our program. So that way they're able to focus on 3 or 4 items from that culture and they rotate the totes every 2 weeks. So they'll have 2 different cultural totes each month for the culture that we're honoring, and they could focus more in depth, whether it's on regalia, whether it's on hunting or fishing, whether it's on tools, and that gives the teachers a little bit more of a clear focal point rather than having all Alaska Native cultures in your classroom all the time. And what's really great about this pilot thing that we're doing with the cultural totes is that the students are going to get excited about new items coming in the next 2 weeks, and they're going to learn about a new culture or a new part of that culture as they go from month to month. But we are rotating the seasonal cycle each school year, and it changes. And this is our current seasonal cycle, with the exception of our Yupik immersion classroom. So we try to bring in as much real things to the students as possible. When we're talking about cutting fish, we bring in an actual salmon and we show them how it's processed. We explain the different parts of the insides to the children, and they learn the different ways of cutting. This was one of our culture bearers. They called him Appa, which means grandpa in Yupik. And he explained to them, that it was the women that did the cutting, and they cut a little bit differently, and their tools were a little different. But I'm going to show you how the men cut the fish from the Yupik culture and how we process it. And the kids get to look, they get to touch, they get to smell. The babies, automatically, they're going to put things in their mouth, and that's okay because that's the way they learn. And so we try to bring as much real items into the classroom as possible. A big part of my job is bringing elders into the classroom. That has been a big challenge when COVID hit us, as we want to keep our elders safe and healthy. And so there have been other ways that we've tried to bring the elders in the classroom through Zoom. And so I've elders who do have access to technology, I've been recording them over Zoom, and then we've been uploading those videos onto our private YouTube channel, and then we're able to share those with the families. And we keep our YouTube channel private because we know a lot of the stories and the language and the culture and the songs are sacred to our people, and we don't want them plastered all over social media. And we want to make sure that we're protecting the rights that they're changing with us as well. So this is just an example of one of our Yupik elders talking about story knives. We also have culture bearers come who are artists, who are dancers, those who are familiar with the Native games. We're currently in search of a Native games instructor to come and work with our sites 2 days a week. And we also bring in fluent language speakers as well. This is more examples of culture bearers that we've brought in, teaching to cut fish. In the center, we have one of our Athabascan language teachers of Gwich'in teaching us about different plants. And then on the right, we have string stories that are done amongst the Inupiaq people. And like I said, our culture is seen inside and out of our program. Last summer, I was given a project to make our company cars look cultural. That'll promote our program and also help with promoting for enrollment. And this project is the biggest project I've had that's given me so much anxiety, because I told Ethan it feels like he asked me to pick out a tattoo for our entire staff. It was kind of permanent, and so it was pretty nerve-wracking, but we did have enough vehicles, so we were able to honor each cultural region within the state of Alaska. Our van represents the Southeast culture, and there's a grandma playing with a raven puppet with her grandson. That's my mother and my now 5-year-old son, to represent the Unanga and the Sukbiak people. We have a Sukbiak dancer showing a beaded headdress to students on our truck. To represent the Yupik area, we have a child playing on our playground on the beluga whale, with some waterfalls in the background to represent our northern families. We have the lower jaw bones of a bowhead whale that are used as landmarkers in the northern Inupiaq and St. Lawrence Island Yupik communities. And there's 2 of our students that are trying walrus masks that come from the King Island area. And then to honor the Dena'ina people on our land in Anchorage, we have Athabascan culture bearer teaching drumming to one of our babies in the classroom with beautiful birch bark landscape. So getting our cultures out from behind the glass, we bring in a lot of artists to create items for us in the classroom, and they're made out of the real material that the cultural items are from. Recently, we've been trying to get more of our ceremonial items into the classroom. Those necessarily aren't there all the time, but our cultural bearers will come in and teach the students how to be respectful with the items. And what I really appreciate about having these real cultural items and ceremonial objects is that the children are going to learn how to be respectful with them now. And it's also going to make them appreciate being an Alaska Native person. And I shared this with my coworkers at In-Service. I said, had these cultural items been in Head Start when I was in Head Start, I can't imagine how stronger a Tsimshian person I would be today. I mean, I know I'm a strong Tsimshian person now, but just to think of the families that that get to have these items and to hold them and understand them and appreciate them and to be to honor and know that what their ancestors went through and where they're going and how their path is a lot clearer. But I just like to say, thank you very much for your time. I wish we could share more, but if anyone is in Anchorage at any time, we would love for you to come and see our Head Start program and see more of our new building that we own and our cultural playground as well. It's a really beautiful building, and it's very cultural, like I said, inside and out. I think we have maybe a few minutes for a few questions. Oh, we don't have time for questions, but Ethan and I are going to be around. We'd be more than happy to chat with you, or if you'd like our contact information, we'd love for you to come and check out our program. Again, thank you very much for having us.
I just want to add that our classrooms, we have unique classrooms. We want Indigenous spaces, so our classrooms have fire pits with smoke holes in them, LED lights, and so we just want you to know that we want our kids in our space. Thank you.
Well, we gave them extra time because what they had to say was so important and valuable. And now we have a couple of announcements. Brooke.
Park Institute location.